11. Ryan O'Connor. 26-year-old Ryan O'Connor was walking down the street in Newport, Wales last year when two teenagers jumped out of a nearby car and brutally attacked him with large knives. The young men, who were later identified as Joseph Jeremy and Louis Aquilina, fatally stabbed their victim in the heart after noticing that he was carrying a Gucci bag and decided to rob him. They carried out the disturbing crime with the help of 3 accomplices, leaving the community reeling over the loss of the eccentric young father they called Apple. Police found 2 of the murder weapons in a stolen car that the perpetrators had allegedly been driving around in, and a 3rd knife was discovered near the crime scene. The investigation led detectives to Jeremy and Aquilina, who were charged with murder and manslaughter. They denied the crimes, but were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Jeremy must serve a minimum of 24 years, and Aquilina is required to serve at least 22 years. And while that may seem like a long time, the killers could see freedom during their early 40s, giving them the opportunity to live a relatively full and satisfying life on the outside. A 3rd defendant was found guilty of manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence. 10. Kate LaMOTHE. One night in 2019, a woman entered a gas station in Pinellas Park, Florida, and asked the clerk to show her a $42 vape from behind the counter that she was interested in buying. When he showed it to her, she snatched it and fled on foot with the vape in hand and tried to get into a Lyft car that she had summoned to the property. Realizing that the woman was up to no good, the driver refused to give her a ride. She then ordered an Uber and began walking while the gas station clerk dialed 911 and reported the bizarre theft. Officers found the suspect inside her Uber at a location nearby and identified her as 24-year-old Kate LaMOTHE. The Tennessee resident was reportedly renting a vacation home in the area and appeared to be under the influence of alcohol, according to an arrest report. She was charged with retail theft and released after her mother paid her $150 bond. LaMOTHE's Lyft account was terminated, and a spokesperson said that the company was willing and ready to help law enforcement with their investigation. She took a plea deal and agreed to pay $350 in fines and court costs. 9. JAYDEN BAEZ. Deputies from the Osceola County Sheriff's Office in Florida were participating in a training exercise at a Target store in Kissimmee recently when employees reported that 2 young men had stolen pizza and Pokemon cards. After seeing the suspects get into a car where 2 other men were waiting, deputies tried to box the vehicle in so they could confront them about the alleged theft. The driver attempted to flee the scene and stepped on the gas, ramming into several sheriff's vehicles. Deputies responded by shooting into the car, killing 20-year-old JAYDEN BAEZ and injuring his friends, 19-year-old Edwin Lowe and 18-year-old Michael Samuel Gomez. While fleeing the cops is almost never the right thing to do, many people are left wondering if law enforcement was too quick to resort to gunfire. After saying very little about the case for a week, Sheriff Marcos Lopez released store surveillance footage of the deadly encounter. He claimed that deputies had announced their presence as they approached the vehicle, but none of them were wearing body cameras at the time, leaving the world to wonder what actually happened. Lopez went so far as to release a list of posthumous charges against Baez, including carrying an unlicensed firearm. Lowe and Gomez were charged with petite larceny. Activists are left outraged over the fact that police killed a young man over pizza and Pokemon cards. But prosecutors announced their plans to follow through with the charges against the surviving suspects. An affidavit states that Target wanted the defendants prosecuted, but a spokesperson denied this and said that the company does not wish to press charges against the young men. 8. Troubled Trio. A Lakeland, Florida resident recently called the Polk County Sheriff's Office after noticing a U-Haul truck in their neighborhood that was driving in a suspicious manner. The witness saw 3 individuals dressed in all black exit the vehicle and tried to approach them. But when they saw the resident, they reportedly got back into the vehicle and drove off. Detectives located the U-Haul at a local Dollar General parking lot and asked the 3 people inside to exit the vehicle. While they were doing so, the detectives spotted a gun on the floor of the truck. They conducted a search and found 2 firearms. The suspects were all identified as teenagers who were on juvenile probation for past offenses. 18-year-old Chelsea McGee allegedly told detectives that she and her accomplices had burglarized 2 vehicles, which was how they obtained the guns that were in their possession. All 3 suspects are facing serious charges, including armed burglary, theft of a firearm, conspiracy to commit vehicle burglary, and possession of burglary tools with intent to use. Despite their young ages, they already have lengthy criminal histories under their belts. McGee's rap sheet includes several felonies and 3 misdemeanors, including petite theft, suggesting that her criminal lifestyle started out with much smaller crimes than the ones she is currently being accused of. She's currently being held without bond while she waits to face her charges. 7. Michelle McKelley. New York City resident Michelle McKelley had 96 prior arrests on her record when she was arrested in February for stealing from a Target store on Manhattan's Upper East Side. The 42-year-old self-described professional booster was out on supervised release when she struck again and was released yet again after her arraignment. Most of McKelley's prior charges were for petite larceny, which is a misdemeanor in New York State. Under the state's bail reform laws, judges have no choice but to let suspects go, even if they continue to commit crimes, as McKelley is accused of doing. Her February arrest came amid a nearly 60% spike in petite larceny crimes across New York City. After seeing that McKelley had failed to show up to court for past offenses more than 27 times, Judge Rachel Pauley reluctantly freed the suspect with a warning that she could issue a warrant and impose bail if McKelley missed another court date. Since then, the serial thief has racked up at least 12 more arrests for stealing $1,375 worth of products from a Rite Aid store and also hitting another Target store. She pleaded guilty to petite larceny and disorderly conduct and was ordered to attend 5 sessions of a program for repeat offenders. The seemingly light sentence didn't sit well with some people, including members of law enforcement who have cited McKelley's case as a clear example of how rehabilitative alternatives to jail just don't work for some people. They were even more outraged to learn that the most recent judge to preside over McKelley's case reportedly congratulated her on taking some of the bare minimum steps that were expected of her. Speaking with the New York Post, former NYPD Detective Sergeant Joseph Giacalone described McKelley as a walking crime wave that needs to be held on bail and do some time for her seemingly constant crimes. 6. FRITZ DEARTH. A deputy from the Marion County Sheriff's Office in Florida recently visited the Ocala home of a woman who suspected that a new checkbook she was expecting in the mail had been stolen from her mailbox. It had never arrived, and when she checked her bank account online, she found images of 2 suspicious-looking checks that she didn't recognize. Both checks were written for just under $370 and had recently been cashed at local credit unions. Employees told investigators that 49-year-old FRITZ DEARTH had cashed the checks using a Georgia ID and turned over surveillance footage of the transactions. DEARTH told deputies that a friend had given him the checks and instructed him to cash them. He reportedly admitted that he knew the checks might be stolen, but that he followed through with his friend's request on the promise that he would receive $150 for doing so. Authorities charged DEARTH with 2 counts of felony fraud and 2 misdemeanor charges for petite theft. He's being held on $6,000 bond as he awaits his next court date. 5. CHASITY PRESSLEY. A couple in Crystal River, Florida, recently called the Citrus County Sheriff's Office to report that they had watched as someone backed their vehicle out of their driveway and drove off. The pair told deputies that they were each using different bathrooms within the home when a thief entered through their unlocked back door and stole a cell phone and a bicycle before getting behind the wheel of their Honda. The vehicle reappeared, only to be stolen again later in the day. Deputies tried to pull the car over, but the driver led them on a chase. After slamming into a metal farm gate, the suspect put the Honda in reverse and crashed into a palm tree. The suspect was eventually taken into custody and identified as 27-year-old Chasity Presley. She allegedly said that she didn't know the Honda's owners, but admitted to stealing their car, along with the cell phone that was taken from inside the couple's house. An arrest report claims that Presley said she was on a 2-day cocaine high when she took the vehicle. She was charged with burglarizing an occupied residence, auto theft, fleeing and eluding law enforcement, petite theft, criminal mischief, and driving with an invalid license, and is currently being held on a $23,000 bond while awaiting her arraignment. 4. Matthew CARRIZOZA. Officers from the Pocatello Police Department in Bannock County, Idaho, were dispatched to a local restaurant earlier this year in response to a weapons-related complaint. They spoke with 2 employees who said that a customer had pulled a gun on them after being dissatisfied with his food. The man, who was later identified as 32-year-old Matthew James CARRIZOZA, had left the restaurant without paying after complaining about his meal. But he left his cell phone, and when he returned for it, workers confronted him about his unpaid bill. During the argument, CARRIZOZA allegedly brandished a multicolored handgun and pointed it at a server. Police located the suspect along a highway a little while later and took him into custody on suspicion of 2 counts of felony aggravated theft and 1 misdemeanor count of petite larceny. He was initially held on $30,000 bond and faced up to 10 years in prison if convicted of the felonies. CARRIZOZA took a plea deal that involved pleading guilty to 1 count of felony aggravated theft in exchange for a recommended sentence of probation. 3. DARREN DURRANT. After realizing that 2 crossbows had been stolen from a True Value store in Brevard County, Florida earlier this year, employees reviewed the surveillance footage in hopes of identifying the suspected culprit. They were shocked to see that a man had used a stolen cutting tool to remove the zip ties from a $1,300 crossbow, and then stuffed it down his pants before leaving the store unnoticed. Sheriff's deputies caught up with the suspect a few days later in a local Walgreens parking lot. He attempted to flee on foot as they approached, but didn't get far before he was apprehended and taken into custody. The man was identified as 47-year-old DARREN DURRANT. He already has 2 felony convictions under his belt and is now facing a felony petite larceny charge for the crossbow theft, as well as 8 burglary charges stemming from an unrelated incident. In a Facebook post, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey announced that Durrant would face justice for the petite larceny charge after dealing with his burglary case in a neighboring county. He described the suspect as the world's dumbest criminal, adding the closing thought, "You just can't make this stuff up." 2. Jonathan Patrick Lucas. A loss prevention worker at a Walmart in Leesburg, Florida, recently sprang into action after seeing a man swapping out price tags to avoid paying full price for some clothing items. The suspect, who was later identified as 35-year-old Jonathan Patrick Lucas, was seen ripping the tag off a $22 pair of shorts in store surveillance footage and then scanning a tag for a $7 pair of shorts at the checkout. He also allegedly removed a $12 price tag from a package of socks and replaced it with a barcode for a $3 item. The employee stopped the man near the store's exit after he paid at the self-checkout. Upon being called out for the price tag swapping, Lucas offered to pay the proper price for the items. But the worker felt that his behavior was unacceptable and called the police, according to an arrest report. Lucas was charged with second-degree petite theft and is being held at the Lake County Jail on a $2,000 bond. If it was his first offense, perhaps his bond would have been set much lower. But it was his 10th arrest in 5 years and happened just months after he did jail time for domestic battery. In addition to his most recent charge, Lucas's rap sheet includes convictions for methamphetamine possession, stealing a car, trespassing, burglary, resisting officers, and several thefts. 1. KENO SEWEL Jr. Amid rising complaints about suspected mail theft in southern Florida recently, detectives from the Broward County Sheriff's Office began surveillance on a vehicle that they believed might be involved. They watched as 2 men removed mail from 2 mailboxes and arrested the pair without incident at a nearby gas station. The suspects were identified as 22-year-old KENO SEWEL Jr. and a minor whose name is being withheld from the media due to his age. They each face 4 charges, including burglary of a structure, criminal use of personal identification information, unlawful possession of personal identification information, and petite theft. Although investigators only saw the duo take a small amount of mail, they suspect that Sewell and his accomplice stole mail from homes in at least 3 Broward County communities. They believe that there may be dozens of victims and urged residents to mail outgoing letters and packages directly from the post office. Thanks for watching. Would you rather have a serial package thief strike your neighborhood during the holidays and steal all the gifts you ordered for your loved ones? Or get a flat tire while driving in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone service? Let us know in the comments below.